10. Scuttled warships. During the First World War, the British Royal Navy's Grand Fleet was based at Scapa Flow, a deep natural harbour off Scotland's Orkney Islands. In 1919, after the conflict ended, the Navy scuttled 74 warships that had belonged to the Imperial German Navy High Seas Fleet. It was the single greatest act of deliberate maritime destruction to ever occur. The British had seized the ship 7 months earlier as a condition of Germany's surrender at the end of the war. Most of these submerged vessels were salvaged throughout the 1920s and 30s, but a handful remain in the harbour today, including 3 Koenig-class battleships, 3 light cruisers, a torpedo boat destroyer, and a mine-laying cruiser. There's also a collection of battleship masts and turrets, along with a multitude of other ship parts that were deemed unworthy of salvaging. Today, the site is a must-see among professional divers who also happen to be history enthusiasts. 9. Buick Roadmaster H. In recent years, photos of a rusting yet paradoxically futuristic-looking Buick Roadmaster H surfaced online. It was reportedly spotted in a field in Greece, leading many to wonder about its backstory. And while the car's exact origins were never explained, savvy internet users have managed to track down some details about the strange-looking hearse. According to one Flickr user, it's a heavily modified version of a 1947 Buick Roadmaster H. The car was originally built in Flint, Michigan, back when the automotive production industry was booming in the US. By the time it was transformed into a hearse, it had 18 windows, a Mercedes-Benz engine, and tail and bumper lights from a 1956 Chevy. When the photos first went viral, the car was up for sale. It eventually found a new home with a buyer named Dante Fontana. He posts daily updates on its restoration for his social media followers. 8. Bulgaria cruise ship. Built in Czechoslovakia during the early 1950s, the Russian river cruise ship Bulgaria originally went by the name Ukraina. As the Ukraina, she enjoyed a 55 career that lasted until 2010, when she became the Bulgaria. The 263-foot-long vessel had a cruising speed of 12.7 miles per hour and a 233-passenger capacity, which was reduced to 120 passengers after it was overhauled. Just hours into a cruise along the Volga River in the Russian Republic of Tatarstan on July 10, 2011, the Bulgaria got caught in a storm and sank. It was Russia's worst maritime disaster since 1986. Survivors later recalled that the ship began listing heavily to starboard, and that the situation only worsened when the captain tried turning the vessel around. Because the Bulgaria had no air conditioning, several of the portholes were open and water rushed in. The sinking came without warning, according to one survivor, and it happened nearly 2 miles from shore. It took just minutes for the ship to sink 66 feet to the riverbed, taking 122 passengers with her. 14 of these 79 survivors were injured, and nearly all of them were rescued by the cruise ship Arabella. One survivor managed to swim all the way to shore. Divers recovered the remains of Captain Alexander Ostrovsky and his wife, along with the bodies of nearly everyone else who perished in the disaster. Many more lives could have been saved if at least 2 ships hadn't passed by without stopping to rescue Bulgaria passengers. 2 captains were charged in connection with their alleged failures to attempt to rescue those in peril. The remains of the final 2 missing passengers were found in the ship's hold after it was partially raised and relocated to the shallow waters of the nearby Gulf of Kurelsky. From there, the ship was relocated to a floating dock for further investigation. 7. Soviet MAZ vehicles. During the Cold War, the Soviet Union developed numerous heavy-duty trucks and tractors called MAZ vehicles. They were designed to carry all kinds of military materials, including the USSR's growing collection of nuclear missiles. Measuring over 38 feet long, the MAZ 543 was a new and improved version of the MAZ 537. Its primary purpose was to carry artillery, rocket, and missile systems. It was designed during the early 1960s and entered service with the Soviet military in 1962. Powered by a standard tank engine, the 8-wheeled vehicle had tandem seating for 2 and was capable of navigating on challenging off-road terrain. The MAZ 543 was replaced during the early 90s by the Belarusian MZKT 7930 Astrolog, which entered service in the year 2000. In recent years, urban explorers have snapped photos of an abandoned all-wheel drive MAZ 543 vehicle sitting next to a Bat-M heavy artillery tractor in a remote forest. Images of another site, which appeared in the English Russia blog, show an assortment of Soviet-era vehicles in the woods just outside Moscow. These few handfuls of vehicles represent just a small portion of the left-behind USSR relics that can still be seen throughout modern-day Russia. 6. Sham Rockaway Motorhome. Alma, Michigan native J. Dennis McGuire made a name for himself as the founder of an RV enthusiast group known as the Family Motor Coach Association, FMCA. He also built a one-of-a-kind custom motorhome called the Sham Rockaway, which became famous for a short while before it was left to rot in a junkyard and subsequently forgotten about. McGuire began building the Sham Rockaway in 1948, according to his daughter Colleen, who provided the vehicle's only known record. Inspired by his love of Buicks, McGuire built the RV using parts from two 1962 models and the chassis from a 1948 model. He incorporated one intact Buick as the center of the motorhome, while cutting another car in half and attaching the pieces to the front and rear of the RV. The third Buick went on top. In his own words, McGuire said, "I didn't build anything, I just reassembled." He equipped the Sham Rockaway with an 8-cylinder engine, but details on the quality of its performance are obscure. There are no surviving photos of its interior, but reports describe the 28-foot-long, 6-foot-tall motorhome as spacious enough for an entire family. It had a bathroom, a kitchen, and plenty of storage space. McGuire finally finished building the RV when he was 69 years old. He and his wife road tripped through Pennsylvania and Arizona with it. In the early 1980s, businessman Bob Tisch used the Sham Rockaway as the official campaign vehicle during his run for governor of Michigan. The motorhome sat abandoned for years before being purchased by a new owner, who had plans to restore it but never got around to doing so. He offered it for sale, but it's unclear whether anyone bought it and restored it, or if it's still rusting away as a shell of its former self. If you could build a custom car, what would you like it to be? Tell us in the comments below and hit that subscribe button while you're at it. 5. Florida Hovercraft. In 2005, a Florida-based company called Atlas Hovercraft set out to become the world's biggest hovercraft design and manufacturing company. According to its president and lead designer Kurt Peterson, each of its vehicles would be between 100 and 125 feet long and would cost around $10 million to build. Using technology that's been around since the 1950s, the hovercrafts would travel over a pocket of air. Production soon began on a vehicle that was meant to ferry civilians across the St. Johns River. Dubbed the AH-100P, it will be equipped with floor-to-ceiling windows, offering passengers a stunning view of the waterway and surrounding landscape as they traveled from one place to another. It would also be quieter, easier to drive, and more efficient than past vehicles of its kind, making it a practical method of transportation. But the huge picture windows were never installed, and the hovercraft was never built past its exterior shell, which was abandoned without explanation after Peterson gave the project's final update in 2008. It remains deserted at the former Leafield military base, which has since functioned as an industrial park since it was repurposed in 1984. Nobody seems to know why the AH-100P or any of the other planned hovercrafts were never built. It was as if Peterson and his company suddenly slipped into obscurity one day without explanation. In 2011, an anonymous internet user claiming to be a former employee said that the AH-100P was cancelled due to a lack of funding, and that he'd heard through the grapevine that Peterson was still involved in developing hovercraft but had moved on to other projects. 4. SS Selma. The world's largest ever concrete ship was the 425-foot-long oil tanker SS Selma. Built in Alabama in 1919, it was produced as part of a plan approved by then-President Woodrow Wilson to continue shipbuilding in the midst of a steel shortage. The plan called for the production of 24 concrete ships, but only 12 were ever built. The Selma was launched on June 28, 1919, the same day World War I ended with the signing of the Treaty of Versailles. Since the ship was no longer needed in war, it went into service as an oil tanker. Less than a year later, it struck a jetty in the Gulf of Mexico, tearing a 60-foot hole in its hull. Efforts to both repair and sell the Selma failed, and US officials ultimately decided to scuttle it in the Houston Ship Channel, where it remains to this day. The partially submerged ship can still be seen today, and is the channel's only permanent wreck. 3. Basnasar Cemetery. Deep in the forest of Sweden's Värmland region, there are hundreds of cars dating back to the 1940s, 50s, and 60s. At the well-hidden property known as the Basnasar Cemetery, visitors find the vehicles stacked on top of each other and parked side by side in endless rows. Located near the Norwegian border, the massive car graveyard has been there for so long that many of the vintage automobiles are covered in moss and overgrowth. Some even have trees growing through them. According to legend, many of the vehicles were left behind by American soldiers when they returned to the US after World War II. But the rumor has never been verified, and a lot of the cars were made long after the war ended. The property is rumored to be owned by a pair of reclusive brothers who interact minimally with visitors and avoid the spotlight. But they live nearby, and they're known to keep an eye on the car cemetery. Past sightseers claim that the owners once left a note scrawled across several car seat covers, stating that it's fine for visitors to come and take photos, but sternly warning them against taking any mementos or leaving the site any different from how they found it. The message further explained that there had been 30 burglaries at the property so far that year, and that the owners were fed up with the repeated crimes. They went on to say that they had set traps inside some of the property's buildings, and that they didn't care if someone got hurt or died. The note also reportedly contained a chilling warning for visitors to remember that they were in a place where nobody would be able to hear them screaming. Nobody knows for sure whether these stories are true or if they're simply the product of local folklore. But many photographers, artists, and explorers are intrigued enough to visit the area anyway, and there are no known reports of anything bad actually happening to anyone. 2. Belleport Hovercraft. Developed in the early 90s, the British-made Trident 1 and Trident 2 hovercrafts ferried around 1,000 passengers a day between Juhu and Chowpatty Beach in Mumbai, India. Each trip took around 30 minutes, and each vehicle had a carrying capacity of 50 passengers. 2 years after the system went into service, the government still hadn't followed through on its promise to provide jetties and access roads on the beaches. Instead, the hovercraft has a designated parking spot on a plot of land. But local fishermen like to park their boats in the same area, often obstructing the vehicle's path. On top of these problems, the ferry's route was cut shorter than its originally planned length. The last Triton ride took place in 1998. By then, it was operating at a loss. Operations were suspended for the monsoon season that year and never resumed. Today, the Trident vehicles remain deserted and forgotten about on the same plot of land where they were parked nearly 25 years ago. 1. Gutian. The Gutian cargo vessel was the largest ever Chinese-made concrete ship, measuring 345 feet long and 48 feet at its widest point. It was built during China's Cultural Revolution in the early 1970s amid a steel shortage, using concrete as a cheap alternative. Based out of the city of Fuzhou in Fujian province, it made its maiden voyage in 1974. The Gutian was abandoned shortly thereafter due to high operating costs. It sat stranded ashore along the Mingjiang River for nearly 40 years as it functioned as a squatter camp, a tourist attraction, and a training base for a local vocational college. Because it was made of concrete, it didn't deteriorate like most deserted ships. Finally, in late 2012, demolition began on the 3,000-ton vessel.
5. V302 John Man. According to a recent study that's being conducted by Belgium, an 80-year-old Nazi patrol boat that sank in the North Sea in 1942 is still leaking harmful chemicals. Based on their reports, the historic Nazi shipwreck experienced harmful chemical leaks that had an impact on marine sediments, as well as the nearby aquatic ecosystem. Scientists are worried about the environmental consequences, but there is still a glimpse of hope. New research from the study confirms that the sunken boat is still contaminating the seafloor, and as a result, it's changing the surrounding geochemistry and microbiology. However, there are indications that marine life is adjusting to the toxic chemicals, which includes explosives, heavy metals, and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, PAHs, from the ship's fuel. Scientists believe that it's also likely that this applies to other wartime disasters as well. On October 18, 2022, a new paper was published in the Frontiers in Marine Science journal that describes the recently discovered Nazi shipwreck in the North Sea. It highlights how historic naval wrecks create man-made landmarks in the underwater environment. Unfortunately, it's still not known what kind of impact these shipwrecks have on local microorganisms and the surrounding geochemistry. To address this issue, researchers collected samples from the World War II-era V302 John Man shipwreck, which is located 115 feet, or 35 meters, off the coast of Belgium. By testing the sediment and steel hull from the ship, they discovered that the wreckage is still influencing the marine ecosystem. The research team found evidence that marine life has adapted to the capsized wreck, and that certain microorganisms are still consuming the ship's metallic remains. According to the Smithsonian Magazine, there are an estimated 2.5 million shipwrecks from World War I and II, weighing roughly 20.4 million metric tons, 20.4 billion kilograms of petroleum products. The hundreds of wartime shipwrecks in the North Sea, located between the British Isles and mainland Europe, may also be affected by this chemical and geological phenomenon. Martin de Reyck from the Flanders Marine Institute in Belgium explained to Live Science that they decided to study the Nazi V302 John Man because of its position in the North Sea. He said that the wreck is located at an easily accessible depth, it's far away from shipping lines, and it gives just enough hydrological conditions for them to conduct research. 4. Blue-ringed octopus. The timid blue-ringed octopus may seem adorable to some people, but it's one of the ocean's deadliest animals. When this tiny bottom dweller is born, it's only the size of a pea. As the creature ages, it doesn't grow much bigger, maxing out at around 20 centimeters or 8 inches, roughly the same size as a golf ball. The lifespan of this species is about 2 to 3 years, but over the course of its short existence, it develops into a very dangerous ocean creature. The luminous blue rings that cover the body of this small octopus make it easy to identify. Thankfully, unless you're swimming in the tidal regions from Australia to Japan, you won't have to worry about running into one. However, if you do come into contact with a blue-ringed octopus, try not to agitate it. The saliva from these creatures can be extremely deadly and contains 2 different forms of venom. One of the toxins is used as a defense mechanism, while the other is used as a means of killing its prey, which is mostly made up of tiny crustaceans. Once they've poisoned their victim, they wait until the venom has spread throughout its entire body before consuming it. Even though these little octopi only reach a maximum length of 8 inches, 20 centimeters, their venom is incredibly potent and there's no known cure. The peculiar neurotoxicity of the small marine animal is at least 1,200 times more lethal than cyanide, and contains dopamine as well as tetrodotoxin, an extremely poisonous compound. The venom from one of these creatures is deadly enough to kill 26 full-grown adult humans in just 5 minutes. A bite can cause eye abnormalities, nausea, trouble speaking, difficulty eating and breathing, and will almost certainly end in death. As dangerous as these octopi are, they pose an even greater danger to themselves. They are what biologists refer to as semalparous creatures, which means they only have one offspring before passing away. Many experts think that in order to prevent cannibalism of their offspring, these animals are biologically programmed to die after mating. 3. 2,000-year-old skeleton. One of the biggest and most mysterious shipwrecks in history is located off the shore of Antikythera, a remote Greek island in the Mediterranean. However, it seems as though the sea may finally be ready to reveal the secrets it's kept hidden beneath the water. A group of international archaeologists from the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, WHOI, and the Hellenic Ministry of Culture has discovered a partial skeleton of a man thought to be in his early 20s. They recovered the remains from its watery gravesite at a depth of about 165 feet, 50 meters below the surface. Researchers believe the skeleton may provide insight into the circumstances that caused the ship to sink over 2,000 years ago. The team of archaeologists discovered the skeleton on their first dive. After reaching the bottom of the seafloor, they wiped away sediment from the ship and uncovered long bones, and eventually the skull. In total, the excavations produced 2 femurs, 2 arm bones, several rib pieces, and a partial skull with the jaw and 3 teeth still attached to it. The bones were located during the team's second excursion of the season on August 31, 2016. The team was already full of excitement following their successful excavation in May of that year, when the crew returned with stunning finds including a bronze spear, gold jewelry, and glassware. They weren't expecting their second dive to be so rewarding, but they were pleasantly surprised by their findings. Marine archaeologist Brendan Foley with WHOI lovingly refers to the remains as Pamphilos, a Greek term meaning friend to everyone. The name is derived from a drinking vessel that Jacques Cousteau, a renowned underwater explorer, discovered in 1976, with the same term inscribed across the rim. The recently discovered skeletal remains were carefully removed and brought back to the surface, where Hans Schroeder, a specialist in ancient DNA from the Natural History Museum of Denmark, had been called in to see if there was any potential for DNA extraction. Schroeder believes that if viable DNA is found, it may provide some of the answers archaeologists are trying to determine regarding the ship and its sinking. Given that they know so little about the crew, the journey, or the kind of individuals that were on board, they may examine the individual's genetic ancestry. Results from this test could provide them with information about their roots and would offer them insight into the passengers of the ship that traveled and traded throughout the Mediterranean 2,000 years ago. 2. Las Cruces de Malp. 40 rock-hewn crosses can be found at a depth of 65 feet, 20 meters below the pristine blue waters of the Canary Islands. Each cross is perched on a sand and rock pedestal, which provides a mournful reminder of the 40 Jesuit victims that were tortured and thrown into the sea by privateers. In the year 1570, there were 2 priests, 23 novices, 8 collaborators, and 7 students traveling from Lisbon to Brazil on 7 different ships, 3 of which were transporting the Jesuits. All of the future martyrs were young when the journey began, ranging in age from 15 to 30 years old. Out of the 100 people on board the vessels, 32 of them were Portuguese, and 8 of them were Spaniards. Surprisingly, one of the passengers happened to be the nephew of Saint Teresa of Avila. The expedition was led by Father Ignacio de Azevedo, the Portuguese-born Jesuit provincial of the Portuguese mission in Brazil. He had returned to Portugal in order to recruit missionaries. One of the 7 ships was required to transport cargo from Madeira Island to the coast of North Africa. However, they stopped in the Canary Islands before continuing on with their journey. Father Ignacio was aware that French Huguenot Calvinist corsairs were known to be present in the region, so he understood that they may have been sailing directly into martyrdom. He asked his crew if they were ready, and 4 of his shipmates asked to leave the boat, who were promptly replaced by 4 others. They were able to participate in the Eucharist celebration at Our Lady of Sorrows Hermitage after landing in Tazacorte. But according to folklore, Father Ignacio had a vision of his magnificent martyrdom during what would be his final mass on the island as he drank the precious blood. He was so moved by what he saw that he bit the chalice, leaving an impression of his teeth on it. The chalice is still considered an important artifact and can be found at the parish of St. Michael the Archangel, located in Tazacorte. Father Ignacio had been tasked by the Pope to carry relics to Brazil, but given their approaching demise, they were abandoned in Tazacorte. However, he kept with him a small picture of Our Lady that was given to him by the Pope himself. As the missionaries continued on their route, the ship carrying the Jesuits was attacked by the corsairs. Father Ignacio urged his young colleagues to dedicate their lives to Christ while holding the picture of Our Lady in his hands. Unfortunately, many of the missionaries were stabbed to death and cast into the water, but others were tossed into the sea while they were still alive. Father Ignacio was pierced by a sword and then stabbed twice more while still clutching the picture of Our Lady. Just before his death, he advised his companions not to be scared and stated, "I die for the Holy Catholic Church and what she teaches." These unfortunate souls are now often referred to as the Martyrs of Tazacorte, or the Martyrs of Brazil, since they were on their way to missions there. And in 1999, a monument was constructed at the scene of their martyrdom. The underwater memorial, which consists of 40 submerged stone crosses, was built with the help of many organizations, including the Council of La Palma. This site is now a favorite spot for divers and is a fantastic location for underwater photographers. 1. Mystery Structure. A strange circular structure that's longer and wider than a Boeing 747 airplane has been found submerged at a depth of 30 feet, or 9 meters beneath the surface of the Sea of Galilee in Israel. The discovery was made by accident when a team of scientists used sonar to explore the bottom of the lake in 2003. However, they didn't publish their findings until 2013. Shmuel Marco, a geophysicist from Tel Aviv University who collaborated on the project, recalled unintentionally bumping into the object. He explained that the lake's bottom is often extremely smooth, and they were shocked when they came across a sizable mound. At first, they didn't understand the significance of this, but after speaking with experts, they determined that the mound appeared to be an extremely massive Bronze Age statue. The structure they discovered consists of basalt rocks placed in a cone-shaped pattern. It's 32 feet, 10 meters tall, the length of the base measures 230 feet or 70 meters, and it weighs roughly 60,000 tons. 54,431,084 kilograms. Astonishingly, its size is double that of Stonehenge in England. The location and size of the structure suggested that it could have been built underwater as a kind of fish nursery. Archaeologists believe it was most likely constructed on dry land before it was submerged by the lake. At first, researchers had a difficult time trying to determine the exact age of the structure. However, after calculations were completed based on the 6 to 10 feet, 2 to 3 meters of sand that had accumulated over the bottom of the base, as well as the other structures in the area, they determined it to be between 2,000 and 12,000 years old. According to experts, sand accumulates at a rate of about 1 to 4 millimeters, 0.1 to 0.4 centimeters per year. Archaeologist Danny Nadel from the University of Haifa collaborated on the project and has participated in numerous prehistoric digs in the surrounding area. Based on his experience, he determined that the site shares similarities to community burial places, although he cautions researchers from drawing any definitive conclusions. Due to the sheer size of the structure, it's truly an unusual discovery. And while archaeologists are not exactly sure what the mound is, there are some theories in circulation that could help to explain the strange rock formation. One theory states that the site could have been a ramp that was utilized for an unknown purpose. Another idea is that the structure was used as a large ceremonial building. Once upon a time, there may have been statues placed on individuals in order to complete some type of strange ritual. However, nobody has been able to explain just how this ancient building was constructed. How long ago it was made, or what purpose it served. While there are several theories that exist, nothing is known for certain other than the fact that it's made of basalt rock and it's absolutely enormous. 9. Underwater Post Office Vanuatu. Located just off the shore of Hideaway Island, about 160 feet or 49 meters off the coast of Vanuatu, an island nation situated 1,000 miles or 1,609 kilometers east of northern Australia, you'll find the only functioning underwater post office in the world. If you need to send a letter from here, you'll need your scuba gear or a snorkel. The mailbox and converted fiberglass water tank are about 10 feet or 3 meters beneath the surface of Malay Bay, a body of water connecting to the South Pacific Ocean. The plan to open up an underwater post office was devised over drinks by the local postmaster and a resort owner. Vanuatu Post first opened for business in May 2003. It's the world's first underwater post office. It literally makes it possible for vacationers to send postcards back home from under the sea. This small kiosk is manned by a scuba diving Vanuatu post worker. You can't just send any normal letter or parcel though. After all, water and paper don't really mix. Instead, pick up a waterproof postcard which will have a special embossed mark on it instead of an ink postage confirmation stamp. Divers aren't the only patrons at this strange post office. There's also an abundance of marine life, with fish darting about the stand as if they're next in line. If the post office is closed, there's no need to worry. There's an underwater post box nearby where you can drop off your items. If you'd rather stay on land, there's a normal post box on the beach too. 8. Port Royal, Jamaica. In the 17th century, Port Royal in Jamaica earned a reputation as the wickedest city on earth. In 1655, the city came under British rule after 150 years of being occupied by the Spanish. The British were a little short-handed when it came to the general management of the settlement, and they enlisted the help of various pirates and privateers. As you can imagine, this went just as you would expect. Although the pirates brought great wealth with them, they also turned the city into a paradise for every sort of sin imaginable. 1 in 4 of the buildings in Port Royal was either a brothel or a pub. The city became so renowned for being a place of extreme wealth and extreme pleasure that it even attracted famous pirates such as Henry Morgan, the same man who's on a certain brand of rum. He even became governor of Port Royal in 1675. It quickly became the second largest city in the New World, spanning 52 acres. However, this pirate party paradise would not last for long. On June 7, 1692, a devastating earthquake shook Port Royal, killing over 2,000 people, crushed by crumbling walls and roofs, and sending 2/3 of the town into Kingston Harbor. What remained of Port Royal is now a small and quiet fishing community. However, if you gain permission from the Jamaican authorities, you can explore the location's darker side by scuba diving down to the lost town's remains, which are 40 feet or 12 meters underwater. The site is in such good condition that it's even called the Pompeii of the Caribbean. 7. Christ of the Abyss, Italy. Off the coast of the Italian town of Portofino, around 45 feet below the water, lies a strange statue. This figure is the San Frutuoso Sea's Christ of the Abyss, which has been resting here for over 50 years. With its arms outstretched to the surface above, the Christ of the Abyss has become one of Italy's most notable dive locations. But why is this statue here? The statue was placed here in memory of Dario Gonzetti, who died during a diving accident in 1947. Gonzetti was one of the first Italians to practice scuba diving, so the town decided the best way to memorialize him was to create a sculpture that you can only see when you're scuba diving yourself. The bronze statue was created by sculptor Guido Galletti. The piece was requested by one of Dario Gonzetti's fellow divers, Duilio Marcante, and was placed in San Frutuoso Cove in 1954. A further plaque was then added to the 8.2 feet, or 2.5 meter tall monument upon Marcante's passing many years later. Curiously, this isn't the only Christ of the Abyss under the waves for you to discover. There's another Christ of the Abyss made from the same mold at Cardenaghe Port. The piece is to remember the tragedy of the Bianca Sea, an Italian cruise liner whose engine room exploded in 1961. 6. Neptune Memorial Reef, Miami. 3 miles, or 4.8 kilometers, out from Key Biscayne in Miami, Florida, USA, is the world's largest man-made artificial reef. However, this reef is different from others, as it also doubles up as a cemetery. Every year, thousands of people choose to lay their loved ones' cremated remains to rest inside concrete sculptures and structures that line the seabed. They're either placed into simple molds with bronze plaques or large sculptures such as mermaids, starfish, and other marine motifs, creating an Atlantis for the departed. The Neptune Memorial Reef is not just a way for people to remember their loved ones in a way that suited them more than a traditional burial, but it's also been amazing for the wildlife too. When the reef was first built, there was practically no sign of marine life at the site. Just 2 years later, following a study by the Department of Environmental Resource Management, the creatures now number in the thousands. Many people come to visit, either to pay their respects or to research the animals that make the reef their home. The area is also designated as a marine protected zone, meaning that the sea creatures are able to flourish without being fished, hunted, or polluted. Would you want to have your final resting place be under the waves? Let us know in the comments and hit that subscribe button while you're at it. 5. The Underwater Sculpture Park, Granada. There's something creepy yet fascinating about the underwater sculptures at Molinaire Bay's Underwater Sculpture Park in Granada. The site is so amazing that National Geographic even named it one of their 25 wonders of the world. The park was the brainchild of Jason DeCare Taylor, and in 2006, it was the first underwater art gallery the world had ever seen. There are over 75 different pieces here for you to discover, over an area of 8,600 square feet. The water is shallow enough that if you don't fancy getting wet, you're able to view them from a glass-bottomed boat. Not only do the sculptures provide a cultural benefit to the area, but an ecological one too. In 2004, Hurricane Ivan swept across Molinaire, damaging and destroying many of the habitats of the local marine life. The statues helped to create new homes for sea creatures, and as a result, the area is now bursting with life. The underwater park also draws divers and visitors, and keeps them away from the remaining coral reefs in the surrounding areas. One of the most famous works is the Vicissitudes. It's been interpreted as not only a sign of unity and resilience, but also by some as a reminder of slavery, due to the fact that the figures are linked together and secured in place by metal stakes. The park is very close to the Middle Passage in the Atlantic Ocean, which was one of the most used routes for slave ships. 4. Sunken P-29 boat, Malta. Just off the shores of Malta, you can find a P-29 Condor-class minesweeper resting on the seafloor. The patrol boat started its life in East Germany, named Boltenhagen after a town. She first set sail in 1970. Her job was to patrol the rivers between East and West Germany, detecting potential mines along the way. When Germany reunified in 1990, Boltenhagen was given a new purpose, but still a noble one. She became part of the German Coast Guard's fleet of vessels, along with other Condor-class ships, helping stricken boats and people. The Condor ship's tenure with the Coast Guard was short-lived though, although she was the very last ship to be decommissioned in 1996. In July 1997, Boltenhagen got its first designation, when it became purchased by the country of Malta to become a patrol boat. That's when she was given the pennant number P-29. She helped to fend off smugglers and assisted with border control operations. The Maltese Tourism Board gave P-29 a makeover, cleaning her thoroughly for her final job. In 2007, P-29, formerly known as Boltenhagen, was purposefully sunk off the coast of the port of Surkewa to become a diving site. The work has paid off, as the P-29 patrol boat is now one of the best dive sites in the world, spotting marine life such as squid, rays, and gurnards. 3. Silfra Fissure, Iceland. Found in the Thingvellir National Park, the Silfra Fissure is the gap between the tectonic plates of North America and Eurasia. The rift was formed around 250 years ago in 1789, when an earthquake ripped through the rock. The fissure grows by 2 centimeters every year, and what makes the site so special is the fact that it's the only place in the world where you can swim between tectonic plates. The water at Silfra fissure is also incredibly pure. When it was created, the fissure cut through an underground spring, which is fueled by the nearby Longjuckol Glacier. The water has been filtered through the rock for almost a century, meaning by the time it fills the glacier, it's clear, creating great visibility. And because it's fresh water constantly trickling in, although the temperature gets cold, the water never freezes over. Silfra is separated into 4 major sections: the Big Crack, the Hall, the Cathedral, and the Lagoon. The fissure spreads over 1,800 feet, although there are some areas that are off-limits. The reason for this is the ever-changing nature of Silfra. Further earthquakes and movements in the rock can lead to sudden rock falls, cutting off areas or making them narrow and dangerous. 2. The Great Blue Hole, Belize. The Great Blue Hole in Belize is located in the Lighthouse Reef, 60 miles, 100 kilometers off the coast. This amazing natural structure stands out from the clear waters around it, as it's bordered by coral and rock in a perfect circle. The blue of the water getting deeper and darker the closer it is to the center. The hole is massive and measures over 980 feet in diameter. At its deepest point, it reaches 410 feet, or 125 meters below the surface. As for what the Great Blue Hole actually is, it's basically a giant sinkhole. It was formed from a limestone cave many thousands of years ago during the last ice age. As the ice started to melt and sea levels began to rise, the cave collapsed, leading to this vertical tunnel in the ocean. The Great Blue Hole has been enchanting divers for decades, including famous diver Jacques Cousteau, who in 1971 declared it to be one of the 10 best diving locations in the world. The Frenchman was also one of those to discover that the Great Blue Hole had been a limestone cave, even finding evidence of stalactites and stalagmites, some of which even tower 30 to 40 feet, 9 to 12 meters tall. The further down the chasm you go, the more rock formations await you. You might not want to venture too deep though. A survey carried out in 2018 sent an underwater craft all the way to the bottom of the Great Blue Hole. After descending around 295 feet, 90 meters, the water soon became toxic, with a layer of hydrogen sulfide sitting on top of it. As a result, marine life just stopped appearing. As for what was at the very bottom, explorers found a Coke bottle, a GoPro, and the bodies of 2 individuals who sadly died while exploring this marvel of nature. 1. The Green Lake, Austria. For most of the year, the Green Lake in Austria isn't actually a lake. Nestled in the Hochschwab mountain range, the location is a park filled with walkers and people enjoying the scenery on wooden benches. However, as the weather warms up around the middle of June, the parkland is swallowed up by Green Lake. The Green Lake most of the time is just a small pond, but as the ice and snow melt and trickle down the mountains, it begins to fill up rapidly, submerging everything around it in up to 36 feet or 10.9 meters of water. Because the water is melted snow, it still remains cold, around 46 degrees Fahrenheit or 7 degrees Celsius. This allows the water of Green Lake to be so clear that you can still see the grass below, which is how it got its name. Don't expect to be able to go diving though, as this has been outlawed since 2016 in order to preserve the area's ecosystem. However, it looks just as fascinating from the surface, even earning itself the nickname of the Caribbean of the Alps. Thanks for watching. Which of these underwater sites would you most like to visit? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. See you next time!